Hi, I'm Jesper from Tungsten Automation, and welcome to the second video in our Decisioning AI Azure Connector series. I'm assuming everyone saw the first video. As mentioned, this is the second in a series of 3. First video, we introduced Decisioning AI, how it fits into the Tungsten Automation portfolio. And in this video, we're going to actually set up a Decisioning AI model in Azure. So what I'm going to be doing is, it's mainly going to be focused on the walkthrough itself, so you can follow along at home. I'll tell you what you're going to need, but I'm also going to make sure that you've got a lot of information. So I'll share a lot of links and make sure you have access to the right documentation. Of course, if you are planning to use a different platform than Azure, I would still recommend to follow along because a lot of the concepts and the workflows that I'm going to be covering in this video are going to be very relevant in other applications as well, whether you're just building a local machine learning model or if you are using another hyperscaler, or essentially anything else you might want to see. And of course, it's going to be great fun as well, which may be the most important thing. So let's dive right in. So what you'll need an Azure account. That's all. You can, of course, always register or sign up for a free account. Of course, I am not sure if you're able to do this for free at the time you're watching this video, because of course things change. So please have a look and see what you can do. Typically, you'll get some credits when you sign up for a free account with Microsoft Azure. Of course, if you do have any questions about this, you're always welcome to reach out to me. But maybe then it's better to talk to your organizational, Microsoft, administrator or a Microsoft representative. Okay, well, essentially, if you've got your Azure account, what I'd like to do is I want to show you what I've based this example on. So this is based on a tutorial that Microsoft has on learn.microsoft.com. And again, as always, I'll add the link to the description of this video if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're finding this video anywhere else, I'll make sure that all of the accompanying documentation will include the same links as well. Why did I decide to use this exact example? On the one hand, it uses a bank marketing data set, and as you remember from video number 1, is I want to do a financial services, more specifically a banking use case focused on, know your customer due diligence, anti-money laundering, those sort of things. So the beauty of this tutorial is it uses a pretty well-known data set, the bank marketing data set. Again, a Creative Commons free-to-use data set. And even though this is a marketing set, as in, is this customer with this data set, will they take a specific service from that bank? But we can, of course, with a bit of creative reasoning, say, well, we might even use that to say whether we want to have a specific customer as a customer going forward. Of course, again, the concept is, of course, still the same, and it all depends on the data and the use case that you're applying. The concept stays true. So this is a great tutorial, and the beauty next to the use case that they're using is this is also going to be based on auto machine learning, as in it's going to do all the heavy lifting. you don't need to write a single line of code. You don't even need to decide on which model you're going to be using. And that's, again, that's something fantastic about the current state of machine learning. Other platforms also use automated machine learning or AutoML, or there are several terms that are flying around, but please make sure that you use something similar there as well. So again, step by step, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create an Azure Machine Learning workspace. We're going to run an experiment. We're going to have a look at the models that you have, and we're going to deploy the model. And by deploying, we will actually be able to then leverage the capabilities of this decisioning engine, this decisioning AI model from TotalAgility. So again, all of the steps are going to be covered by this tutorial. Make sure that you have the bank marketing train CSV and just store it somewhere, and it's going to be just fine. So first things first, we're going to create a workspace. What you can do is you can follow the link right here and go into your machine learning studio. What I actually want to do as well is I want to do this straight from the Azure portal. And the reason for that is that I already have a workspace, but I want to start from scratch. So as you see, this is my personal Microsoft Azure portal. And what we're going to do is I'm actually just going to say I want to go into, well, Azure Machine Learning. So what you can then do is you can either go through here or just go to more services. Make sure that you either have, well, AI machine learning selected, or in all you're going to see Azure Machine Learning, and just do it like that. As you see, I already have a workspace here, but I'm just going to create a new one, a new workspace. Select the subscription you want to use, create a resource group. Again, I always recommend creating a resource group for these sort of experiments. So at the end of this, if you've done your test and you've gone through the whole tutorial, the only thing you have to do is just remove that resource group and you're good to go. So, decisioning a video. There we go. So we've got that set up, and we're gonna create a workspace. So again, I'm just gonna create a workspace, decisioning AI video workspace. There you go. Again, region depends on what you want to do, or wherever you want to deploy this. I'm based in Western Europe, so for me this makes sense. For now, storage account, key vault, I'm just going to keep this as the defaults, because again, this is an experiment. If you do want to do this for production purposes, make sure that you think about these sort of things. Networking. This is also a good point where you really need to consider. So in the interest of this demo, I'm just going to keep it at public. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to make sure that no one can reach this afterwards. But again, think about how you want to approach this. For now, ease of use, but going forward, it's something else. Encryption, leave it at the default. Identity, just leave it at the default. Tags, if you want to do that. Review and create. You'll see that Azure is now validating this, and then just create the workspace. And then you'll just have to wait until it's done, and you'll see it pop up here in your machine learning overview. You'll see that it's still provisioning the environment. Of course, you can refresh it and just keep waiting. We'll get a ping well, with the magic of video editing, I'll be back when it's done. So there we have our new workspace. Let's open that, and you'll then see that we've got a studio web URL. So let me then welcome you to your very own Azure AI Machine Learning Studio. There's a lot here to take in, and I can spend literally days talking about all of the abilities and all of the capabilities and all the functionality that's available here at your fingertips. But in the interest of your time, let's just focus on what we're going to do. That is automated machine learning. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new automated ML job. You can just keep everything at default for the first screen here. So it's going to have an automatically generated job name, experiment name. Just leave it as is. What we're then going to do is we're going to indeed select what kind of task we're going to do. As mentioned previously, we're going to be doing a classification exercise. So just select classification and create your data. Make sure that you have it as it's defined, and make sure that it's set for tabular. And maybe just create a nice name for this. Bank marketing data, something like that. Doesn't really matter what you do there. Make sure that you say from local files, because we have just one file that we want to add, and you can then just create it on a workspace blob store. Select the one you've got, and then upload files or folder. And again, it's just the single file that you've got. So here you've got your bank marketing CSV. Again, this is the one that we downloaded at the start of this video. Okay, I'll leave it at that. And just click next. There we go. Make sure that everything here looks as you might expect it. There we go. And then we're just going to continue to the schema. So again, what we can now do is we can select which columns you want to include and which you don't want to include. So again, I'm just going to follow the tutorial that we're basing this on. So you can just deselect day of the week, which in all honesty shouldn't really matter if you want to determine whether you want to approve a loan request. So that's what it is. But again, this is where you can then say, well, we want to disregard these data points, yada, yada, yada. No problem there whatsoever. And we can just click on next, make sure that everything is done. You can of course use this to make sure that, it doesn't match exactly with how you've got it set up. Doesn't really matter, just create it. Creating the data asset, there we go. So now what you'll see is that we have the task type and the data. Here we go. Make sure that you select the data that you want. Indeed, just check that box, click on next. And what we then do is indeed say, okay, well, what is the actual outcome that we want to predict, or which is the indicator for the decision that we should make? As in, what should be the return value of the actual inference? So every time you give the data to this model, which is the outcome you would expect? In this case, it's indeed the Y column. And that Y column, indeed, in the scenario that we're discussing, you might say, should we accept or should we indeed provide this applicant with a loan or a mortgage, however you want. So your configuration should automatically also select the Y column as the target column. I will always recommend to then also review the additional configuration settings. Make sure that you've got explain best model. If you have that selected, you can select what the primary metric should be. So if you want to know a bit more about what kind of metrics these are, yeah, I would recommend just give it a click, and it's going to guide you through what the supported primary metrics are. For now, just keep it at AUC weighted. Make sure that we've got that. Just save that and just keep it as it is for now. You might want to consider setting up something like a limit that you want to do experiment timeout. I'm typically going to say and make sure that we set this for a max of 60 minutes. Otherwise, it might take a while. So when it comes to compute, easiest is, again, just keep it at serverless. If you already have a compute instance or cluster running, you can select it. In this specific scenario, it doesn't make sense to put this on GPU. Just leave it as is. Doesn't really matter. You can, of course, up the size of this. So we might want to go for a DS12 V2 if we've got that. Yeah, that's also the recommended one from the tutorial. Just select that. Number of instances, just keep it as 1. It's going to be fine. Just click next and make sure that you review all of these settings. Just keep it as is. And what you'll then do is just say submit training job. It's going to submit. This is going to take a while. And what you'll then see is that it's going to start once it is ready to go. So you now have indeed an automatically generated task running. So silver deer. Well, of course, your results will vary. There we go. And you'll now see that it is running. And as mentioned, this is going to take a while. So you can just click that and say job details. Again, it's going to immediately go back to this if you want. You'll see that you'll have the output logs available. You'll see the outcomes once it's done. And you'll see, okay, well, now it's already running. So that's nice. And again, with the power of video editing, I'll be right back. So after a short 45 minutes, we got the notification that our automated machine learning job is completed. Wow. And if you remember, we set the timeout for this job at 60 minutes. So why did it end at 45 minutes? Well, you already see the answer here. Of course, keep in mind that what does this automated machine learning exercise actually do? Well, it just keeps improving and it tries to keep iterating. And what it then does is if it's been unable to improve upon the metric that we selected, in this case, AUC weighted, it's just gonna stop because it just says, well, I don't expect we can improve upon the score that we already did. Of course, this is great when you want to, keep costs in check. So just leave it at that. It's going to immediately tell you, okay, which of the algorithms that we tested as part of this exercise has been deemed the best. In this case, it's a voting ensemble. But of course, we can also dive in and have a look at the other models as well. Again, in this case, it's all sorted by AUC weighted, that metric. We can go in, we can have a look and see, okay, well, the overview, how it's been run. You can go all the way down into the actual code that has been generated, all of the results. I'm just going to skip over that for now. The other thing, of course, if you remember, is we tick that box for explanation, but we don't see explanation here yet. And that's for a very good reason, because if you go all the way to the right to child jobs, you'll see that it has run the AutoML one, and we also have the dynamic guitar one, which is the model explanation, and it currently is set as queued. So because we are running serverless, we now have to wait for an instance to become available. Of course, if you've got a dedicated compute instance, or maybe even better yet, a dedicated compute cluster, then of course you're in much more control on when these jobs get executed. Of course, in this case, we'll now see indeed the responsible AI one is running, and we have the model explanation still being queued. So again, we'll come back to this later. For now, let's focus on the next step in the tutorial, which is actually deploying this model. Of course, a couple of the other things you can do. You can, of course, also compare these with other models, all of those things. But when we deploy it, we've got several options: real-time endpoint, batch endpoint, web service. In the interest of this scenario, we will go for the real-time endpoint, because what we want to do is we want to get immediate responses as part of our TotalAgility process. So that's why I'm selecting real-time endpoint. Web service would also be an option, but that is really meant as a more business critical service, and this is indeed much better suited to our current needs. So again, select a virtual machine that we're going to deploy this model to. For now, just take an affordable option. So I'm just going to do the D2AS v4. How many instances do you want? Well, again, just one. Make sure that you create a nice endpoint name, or just use the automatically generated one. If you've got an endpoint already, you can add to it. Let's just keep it at that. Let's discuss some other points here. So what it can also do, it can actually store all of the data that you submit to this model as well. And this is, of course, something that you can then do to, train and keep tabs on how your model is performing. However, keep in mind that the goal of this decisioning AI engine is it should be part of an overall process within TotalAgility. So we can actually do something that, in this case, just standalone Azure machine learning can't do, is we can actually go back after the fact, maybe a full onboarding process has been finished, and we can then keep adding real world results back into the system. So we can actually make sure that this model keeps improving and improving and improving, because we are not just limited to the scope of inferencing for ongoing data collection. That's, again, maybe something to keep in mind. So what you'll then do, you can also have a look at some of the other options you have, but it's beyond the scope for this. So we can just deploy this. Oh, now it's got 2 instances. Well, good for them. Again, this is going to take a while, so I'll be back when this has been deployed. So after a while, we are then presented with our deployment of our machine learning model. So again, this is the decisioning AI model that we will be consuming from TotalAgility in video number 3. But before we close off this video, there are some things that we do need to discuss. Maybe first start with how we can test our deployment. So as you can see, we can now just submit a data packet to this endpoint, and we're going to get an inference result back. So I do have a prepared data packet right here. As you can see, I just copied some parts from the CSV. We can now test it, and as you see, we'll then be presented with the result, in this case just yes. However, we do want to test and see if we can also get a no result. But in order for us to do that, we must go back to the automated ML part, and more specifically to the model that we've got here, the voting ensemble. And if we then go into explanations or responsible AI, those jobs have also finished. We are then presented with some great insights. So for instance, with responsible AI, there is a lot of information here that you can find. Again, beyond the scope of this video, do spend some time there. I can really recommend doing that. But for the explanations, as you can see, this also shows what the features, as in, well, the data aspects that have the biggest impact on the actual outcome, the inference results. So we see that the duration is probably the most important one. So keep that in mind. So if we then go back to our endpoint right here and we test it, and I'm just going to do it the exact same thing. So right now it's yes. So if we then change, in this case, the duration, right now it's 700. If we then change that to, let's say, 200, we now get a no. And of course, we can start playing around with all of these values. Again, what do we need for our next step in our process? Of course, we need to have the endpoint URL, and we'll need to have the authentication key there as well. One thing I do want to point out, if you immediately continue with video number 3, you can keep it as it is right now. If you don't know when you're going to continue with the next steps, you might want to consider removing the deployment or deleting your deployment, because that will, well, infer certain costs on Azure. If you don't plan on continuing, then I would recommend to remove the actual Azure resource group. That way you won't infer any sort of cost. That being said, I'd like to close this part of the series for now. Just a quick recap. What have we done? We have created a automated machine learning job based on the data that we downloaded, or which could come from your own organization. We then saw how automated ML made suggestions based on our choice of, well, metric. We've then deployed that, and we've been able to test it. And then, of course, in video number 3, we're continuing with TotalAgility and how to consume this. Again, I want to thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed this. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to your local Tungsten Automation representative. For now, please stay safe, stay healthy, and see you for the next one. Thanks. Cheers.